Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm Sarah. I guess for those in the audience who maybe aren't as familiar with the FTX story, as I'm not either, can you kind of start from the beginning and tell us a bit about who Sam Bankman-Fried is and what he's done and why he's in the news?
Yes, absolutely. Hi, everyone. Hope you're having a good day. This is a fantastic venue, and I love that there are dogs. Just before everyone goes to sleep, the book that I've written about crypto is a book about crypto for people who don't think that they're interested in crypto. That is the first thing to say. The subtext to this book is kind of how crypto took over my life without me really intending it to. So I think the way to start with the story is kind of how I got pulled into it. And I'm a reporter at the Financial Times. I covered kind of the investment world, personal finance, what people are doing with their money. And crypto had become, so this was, we're going back a couple of years, 2021, 2022. You guys probably remember there was that period of time where crypto was sort of everywhere. And it was all people were talking about. And it was all over social media, all over the TV. And there was this, can you hear? Yeah? Okay. I will do my best to shout, sorry. Especially for the folks behind. Hello. Oh, that's good. There was this figure who sort of came onto my radar as a journalist, Sam Bankman-Fried, who some of you may have heard of, some of you may not have, who is the chief executive of this fast-rising cryptocurrency startup called FTX. And I got invited at some point to go to a conference that FTX was having in the Bahamas, because they were headquartered in the Bahamas. And so, the FT has more travel budget than some newspapers, but even at the FT, if you say you want to do a work trip to the Bahamas, people kind of look at you a bit squiggle-eyed.
Yeah, I can vouch for that.
Yeah. So that was my big pitch, was I wanted to go to the Bahamas and cover this story, because he had become this sort of global phenomenon, like the most famous person in crypto. And he had this story that he was telling about basically how he was going to make billions in crypto. He was already a billionaire. He's like my age. He was a year older than me, already a multi-billionaire. But his story was he was going to give all this money away to charity. And he was sort of like a money-making machine to give money to philanthropy. And so there was this incredible contradiction in that. Like, crypto is kind of a dirty business. He's making money off of people. And then he's going to kind of whitewash it all by giving it away to charity. And I thought this is interesting. I thought this guy's kind of, strange, interesting character. And so I went out to the Bahamas. They said yes, unbelievably, and they sent me off to the Bahamas to go to this conference, which was like, I thought it was going to be crazy, and it was crazier than you can imagine. I mean, the story I will never live down is I walked past Katy Perry in a hallway, and I didn't recognize her. And I got to the end of the hallway, and someone said, "Did you see Katy Perry?" And I was like, "Oh, that's why that lady looked familiar." So my husband.
What was she doing there?
She was there privately. She never sung, sadly, but she was there because she was like totally enthralled with Sam Bankman-Fried and thought he was going to save the world, and had basically gone to this private dinner that they had in the wings of the conference. And I guess the highlight of the event was Sam Bankman-Fried. He interviewed Tony Blair and Bill Clinton on stage. And Sam, just to paint a picture, Sam never wears anything other than shorts and a t-shirt if he can help it. And he has this kind of crazy hair and is very sort of socially awkward. Nothing wrong with that, but he's not the kind of guy who's typically interviewing former president, former prime minister. And so the level of sort of celebrity and glitz and glam that they had put on at this conference was just beyond belief to me. And it was already kind of, at that point, the party at the edge of the world, because crypto had this huge run-up. The peak crypto in total is worth $3 trillion. Query why it should be worth $1, but it was worth $3 trillion. And by the time they're having this huge party in the Bahamas, it was kind of already on the way down. So we're in the spring of 2022, and they were just about to sort of fall off the cliff. It was kind of that moment of, if you watched Looney Tunes cartoons like I did when I was growing up, like the Wile E. Coyote has run off the cliff, but he hasn't looked down yet. And they were about to sort of start to plummet. And that is what happened basically a month after I came back from the Bahamas. Crypto crash, and it turned out behind the scenes at this company that was Sam Bankman-Fried's company, FTX, was supposed to be the kind of most incredible, successful company in crypto. We'll get to this later on, but they had been basically cooking the books, making off with money that wasn't supposed to be theirs. And when there was a crash in the wider market, as always happens with these financial stories, once the sort of music stops, it was all exposed. And so, flash forward to today, he's been convicted of a multi-billion-dollar fraud and is probably going to go to jail for 40 or 50 years.
40 or 50 years?
That is what the government's asking for.
Okay. And I mean, so you were obviously kind of reporting on this story for about 2 years, and you had a real ringside view to Sam and the business. What did you kind of think of him as a person? What can you tell us about his personality? And
I think one of the things that pulled me in and pulled the sort of whole world in is he is a captivating personality, and he had this ability to kind of talk his way into or out of almost anything until the very end. He's a very socially awkward person, as I said, hyper-intellectual, incredible talker, and he kind of always would give you things in probabilities. If you asked him a question, he'd say, I think there's a 10% chance of this happening and a 90% chance of that happening. And the more you sort of listen to it, it sounds very convincing and brilliant at the beginning. You're like, wow, his mind is going 1,000,000 miles a minute and he's coming up with these calculations, but he's literally making it up, right? He doesn't know that it's 10% this and 90% that. He just had this way of making it seem as though his mind was on another level to yours. And I think all the weirdness, in the tech world these days, we kind of like business executives who are really weird. The sort of since, I don't know, you could argue, but maybe since Mark Zuckerberg, if you kind of don't dress the part, if you don't act the part, people think that's kind of better than if you show up in a suit and you know how to sort of behave in a really polished way. So the thing that made Sam stand out from the rest of the crypto world, which I also covered and is in the book, but what made him singular is that he kind of sold himself to mainstream finance as the person who could make crypto into the mainstream. And so that the other kind of it's the introduction of the book if you want to read it. But my mum's pension fund invested in FTX. So she is a public school teacher in Canada, which is where I'm from, and they were one of the big mainstream investment institutions that invested venture capital money into FTX alongside, you could go down a list of any finance company you've heard of, but they had absolutely sold themselves to Wall Street, to Silicon Valley, to all the VCs, because people looked at Sam Bankman-Fried and they thought, that's the next Mark Zuckerberg, or that's the next, Elon Musk, and don't take my word for it. I mean, this is what they said at the time. There is still this belief in these kind of founder characters who can, make a great company. And I think we have too much, part of what the book is about, is we have too much belief that it's one guy, and unfortunately usually it is a guy, that people have this idea that, oh my God, as if it doesn't take hundreds of people and thousands of people to make a successful company, all this money is chasing that one person. And they thought they had found him and they sort of were ignoring the rest of it.
It is quite an insane story, and to think that this guy who was under 30 could just hoodwink all these supposedly really smart kind of money managers just on the basis of his hair and his cargo shorts, and he was then kind of, I don't know, seen to be the Mark Zuckerberg of crypto. But obviously he wasn't alone, right? He was actually in this polycule in the Bahamas, with his on-off girlfriend, and there was a big kind of group of them operating behind the scenes. Did you kind of have any access to them, and did you see much of the world and culture that he'd cultivated around FTX?
Yeah, and that was something that we sort of started to dig into once, particularly once the company started to go down. I mean, just to keep people, just to follow along the timeline, so flash forward, sort of 6 months after the Bahamas thing, last November, there's basically a week-long period where the wheels come off the bus. And they'd kind of been in financial distress for this whole period because crypto was going down in value and it was exposing all the kind of cooking of the books that had been going on. But basically, it came out through there was a leak and then an attack from a competitor company and this sort of high drama. But basically, there's a week-long period where the company goes from being on Monday, it's worth $40 billion, most successful tech startup in the world, and on Friday, filed for bankruptcy. Basically, the entire staff has quit, and most of Sam's kind of inner circle has basically run away. The stories from this period are just kind of mind-blowing. Like they're all in the Bahamas, right? So they would, the only reason to be there was to work. So people who literally drove their cars to the airport, threw the keys on the seat, and just left. Went back and lived with their parents mostly, because these are all still kind of people in their 20s. And then around Sam, there is this little inner circle who were kind of with him, orchestrating the fraud, and they had very complicated, as you alluded to, interpersonal relationships. Basically, everybody's sleeping with everybody else.
Sounds like a funny soap opera more than.
Well, it's sort of like a frat house, but as a co-ed frat house. They lived in this penthouse in the Bahamas, which is as tacky as you would imagine, but it's huge. I mean, very glamorous with the yachts and the whole thing. And there's 6 bedrooms. Or 5 bedrooms, I can never remember. But there's like 10 people living in, so they're packed into this penthouse like it is a university dorm. And they're mostly university friends. They kind of, in a weird way, there's this Peter Pan quality to the whole story where they never grew up. But all these people kind of, once they realize that the company's doomed and the feds are going to be down here in about 5 minutes, right? Like this is only going to end in court. People start to bail, as you would. And so, when you get to the trial, which was this year, you've effectively got all these kind of, who were the closest friends and romantic partners of each other, everyone starts to betray each other and basically testify against different people, and they all ultimately flip on Sam.
Right, and you were actually at the trial was it the duration?
Yeah,
in
I was
October
there. I was there every
last
day
year?
for my sins.
Okay. And yeah, what was that like? Obviously, it was trial for like the largest fraud case in American history. What did it feel like just being in the court and?
Well, people say court is boring, and I was kind of quite excited to go cover the trial, and I think I thought it was an incredible story. And my colleagues who are sort of wizened, court reporters who've done a million of these all said, "Don't get too excited, Josh. It's quite procedural, it's quite dull, it takes a long time." And yes, there was the day when the man from Google came and explained to us what metadata was for like 3 hours, and so everyone's sort of napping in the back of the courtroom. But the majority of this was just the most riveting courtroom TV that you could have thought of, because it's the people.
Why?
Well, it's the courtroom is like, I'm trying to think, if you sort of went from halfway up this room up to the altar, or it's quite small. It's considerably smaller than this room, and packed into this space, like the level of kind of intrapersonal drama that you have. Because Sam's sitting here, and with his lawyers, and all the witnesses have to walk, as far away as the end of the platform, right past him. And these are this is his ex-girlfriend, his oldest friend, his childhood friend, who are the executives at his company, who are coming in to say he's guilty and he basically should go to jail for the rest of his life in order to save themselves, because by cooperating with the prosecutors, they get off. Almost. I mean, they will have some consequences, but not nearly as severe. His parents are there every day. Sam's parents, who I had met because I visited him. There's a period where he was under house arrest, and I visited his house, so I'd met his parents. And so I kind of had a sense of, obviously, I think he's guilty, and I think he, deserves consequences. But I think if you have met someone and interacted with them, you always have a degree of, you can't help but think about your own parents in that situation, like what it must be like for them. And then there's this kind of mounting tension through the whole trial of, will he testify or won't he, right? We know the other witnesses are going to come in, his ex-girlfriend, his oldest friend, his co-founder, are going to come in and say he's guilty. So will he try and take the stand to defend himself? And this is a very risky thing to do, because if you take the stand to defend yourself and you still get convicted, there's an implication that the jury didn't believe you, and therefore you've committed perjury, and that makes your sentence likely to be much worse. So it's kind of, if you testify and you still get convicted, you're going to go to jail for longer. But if you don't testify, you have all these other witnesses who are going to say you're guilty, and he's the only person who can kind of tell his side of the story. So I think, at the end we should have known that he was going to do it. The personality that he has, very arrogant, frankly, very confident in his own abilities. But he kind of gets up to try and defend himself, and then it's obviously, his testimony goes okay, fine, he kind of tells his side of the story, it's not very convincing. But the cross-examination, everybody don't commit serious financial crimes in New York. These people seriously know what they're doing, and the lawyers were it's just decimating him. You know, you could sort of see the lawyer who did it, name is Danielle Sassoon. She's like she looks like innocence itself when she's walking down the street, and then she gets behind the podium in the courtroom and she's got the binder open, this huge binder this thick, and you can kind of see she's got questions on one page and then all the receipts of like, if he says this, I'm gonna bring out this piece of evidence. If he says that, I've got this piece of evidence. And then for me, the slightly awkward part was some of the evidence that they had was stuff that Sam had said to me.
Wow.
So they did this with a couple of other journalists, but you know, where they would say, well, you told Josh Oliver in the Financial Times on this date X, and now you're saying Y, which is true. And you know, no journalist likes to have their sources, whoever they are, asked under oath, you know, did Josh Oliver print something in the Financial Times that's not true, or are you lying to me? And so obviously I had to go home nervously to my hotel room at the end of that day in court and be like, go back to my notes and make sure that I had the recording of the interview.
Go through your transcript again.
I went through the transcript. I just couldn't help myself. I was like pretty confident that I had gotten it right at the time, but I had to go back and check. So it's like, okay,
that does sound extremely stressful.
But it was quite stressful in the moment. Everyone in the courtroom sort of was like, you know. But he just got absolutely run over by a truck on cross-examination. I mean, it couldn't have gone worse. He said they counted, obviously, because the prosecutors know what they're doing, and he said, I don't remember, I think 150 times in a day and a half of cross-examination, which at a certain point just doesn't work as an explanation. So, you know, in the end, the jury, and again, like the jury are like, it's quite striking when you have the jury selection. You know, we think in the, you know, media bubble this is a big story, and then you get a random selection of people off the streets of New York and say, have you ever heard of this guy? And then basically nobody, you know, knows who this person is. And they, you know, because they're like doctors and teachers and have regular jobs, and they just didn't buy it. I mean, he was convicted in 4.5 hours of deliberation.
Which is really
pretty fast.
Pretty
I mean,
fast
everybody said, everyone said it would be, you know, a couple of days waiting around. As a consequence of which, I was on my way to the airport when he was convicted, which was not good timing. But yeah, he was, well, he went down, and so now he's waiting to be sentenced.
And was there any part of you that kind of sympathized with him, I guess, as someone who was, you know, close to you in age and someone who you just like had some sort of a professional like relationship with, I guess, and then seeing him in that kind of position, being quite like vulnerable and with his parents, I don't know, like.
Yeah, no, I think I always say if you're a human being and you've had a human interaction with somebody and you see them in that situation, I think there's always going to be a part of you that feels bad. But you know, I know that I think that he, you know, is guilty and committed fraud and deserves to be punished. I do think the sentences in the U.S. for financial crimes, you know, nonviolent financial crimes, are pretty. I mean, I don't know what the equivalent would be in the UK, but I don't know what you have to do in this country to get sent to jail for 50 years. It's, you know, in Canada it would be like murder. You know, so that seems. I think he deserves to be punished, but I'm not sure if that, you know. But I think the thing that I always had to correct in my head with his character, and it's one of the reasons he was so successful, is he comes from the kind of same sort of rough background as I do. Like, I'm from Canada, he's from the US. He grew up in the suburbs, I grew up in the suburbs. His parents are law professors, my parents were lawyers. And most of the people who are in the book, who are these other, you know, figures from crypto, come from, you know, I guess quite outsider-y type backgrounds in one way or another. And I think one of the things that Sam Bankman-Fried really got was how to play the fact that he kind of went to all the right schools, knew how to talk the talk, you know, he had that. So people related to him and thought, oh, he seems like a nice boy. And you kind of have to fight that bias, I think, as a journalist, and not think, yes, he seems like someone who I can relate to because we're similar age and, you know, in some senses a similar background. But you shouldn't let someone off easy because of that. You know, you have to kind of check that impulse and think, no, this person did these things and they do deserve to be punished.
So you do think it is very much that it was kind of calculated and he was very much in it for the money and to get rich. It wasn't sort of sloppiness and...
Yeah, I mean, to get rich, I always struggle with. I think to get power was more, you know, to have influence and power and kind of rule the world. I don't know if money was the thing. And I think with all these crimes, I mean, these big frauds like Madoff or something like that, I don't think people sit down with a whiteboard and are like, fraud, okay, let's, you know, are we going to do telemarketing or are we going to do whatever, you know. There is a degree to which it creeps up on you, right? So I think when they started cheating it was in a context where almost nobody would care. It was a small company. There's like a couple $1 million involved. It's like way out in crypto land. And this is before crypto became the biggest noise in town, so nobody cared. But then I think once, as time goes on, it just gets to be more and more money. And then they have opportunities to either kind of bail out or fess up, to fess up or to double down. And basically every time they double down, and as time goes on, it just gets to be more and more money until you get to the point where, oh my God, this is like this 10-ton anvil hanging over your head of $9 billion of other people's money that we don't have if they ask for it back. Which is then obviously exactly what happened. Everyone asked for it back at the same time and they didn't have it. So, here we are.
Yeah. And why did you want to write this book, having, already obviously reported on it so extensively? Why did you kind of want to add to the story? Yeah,
people may be aware that a very much an unknown financial author called Michael Lewis has written a book about Sam Bankman-Fried. If you don't know who Michael Lewis is, the most famous and successful financial author in the world. So it was, to do another book on the same subject, I definitely had the question of, well, why do you want to do this book? It came out of a piece that we wrote in the FT for the magazine, talking about that final week and how dramatic that was. But I actually thought that the book I wanted to write was taking one step back, because the story kind of, I think if you think about it, it's just completely bonkers, right? That this happened, right? How is it that my mom's pension fund ended up putting $100 million into this company in the Bahamas, run by this 27-year-old guy who's doing crypto? What world are we living in here? And so the idea of the book was to actually, try and sort of look at the world around, FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried, not just him, because I think his personality is sucks in all the attention. And the Lewis book is very much about his personality. It's a good book, it's well written, but I thought there's other characters and there's other people who are in the world around him. So his sort of arch nemesis, CZ of Binance, which is his other crypto company. There are these other people who lent money to FTX and sort of helped them get in the hole, and this whole world of crypto lending. There's kind of the history of how the crypto market evolved. And so the journey, if you want to buy the book, the journey the book will take you on is just to start with SBF, and then it goes back a little bit and tries to fill in the background so that when we get to the story of how did this rise and fall of SPF happen, hopefully it makes more sense to people and you kind of understand the context. And I think the ultimate objective is that it's a great story. The characters are all completely crazy, and it's kind of true crime, the biggest scandal of the last couple of decades. But hopefully you get to the end and feel like, actually, I'm starting to get this crypto thing as well, because I think people there's a big gap between the marketing of crypto to the world and what the reality of crypto is. And I think, people can. Am I about to get
no, brilliant.
On
that provocative note, I love it. We've only got 5 minutes left, and I'm sure there'll be some audience questions.